Do DJs need a personal website nowadays? What do you need to consider if you've been asked to DJ at a sporting event? If you need a really portable but professional DJ system, then what's out there? How loud should you play so that people enjoy what you're doing but you don't hurt their hearing or upset the person who's paying your salary? These questions and many more are answered in this edition of the Digital DJ Tips DJ School Your Questions podcast. It's recorded in front of an audience of our students who, as ever, were really helpful in adding colour and feedback to this. So thank you to everyone who took part. Shall we get going then? Our first question today is from Chris. And Chris has got a question about DJ websites. Chris says, I need a website set up catering for my DJ events, for my gigs and for my private functions. Are there any companies you could recommend out there? Well, let's talk DJ websites. We haven't done this for a while. The first question is, do you really need a website? So if you are a club DJ, if you're an underground DJ, if you're chasing residencies in your town, probably not in this day and age. If you've got a well-maintained Instagram, if you've got a SoundCloud or a Mixcloud account to share your mixes and your productions and your re-edits and all that kind of good stuff on, then honestly, that's probably enough. Promoters are going to look at your following and look at your interactions and look at how busy those things are. And that really is going to be sufficient. However, as Chris says, look, if you're doing DJ events, if you're doing private functions and corporate gigs, then definitely you do still need a website. And the reason for that's really simple. There will be more than one person involved in making the decision about whether to book you. Your name, your website will be passed around between the couple getting married, the HR department at the company who's been told that you're a good DJ for their next event, and so on. You do need a website for that kind of thing, and that hasn't changed. Websites are one of those big enduring things like email that doesn't matter what else comes along, whether it's AI or social or whatever, we still need an email address. And I would argue as a business, which is the difference between an underground club resident DJ and a DJ who is getting paid to do a job for someone, that is the business side of it that still needs a website. All right, so yes, you probably do still need a website, Chris. Chris's question was, are there any companies you could recommend out there? Well, let's talk about what we need nowadays when it comes to websites. 15 years ago, paying $2,000 to someone to design a website for you and then having to get them on the other end of the phone every time you need a little change making and all that. Yeah, maybe, but look, definitely not now. Squarespace, Wix, Card, all these companies have got templates that are absolutely fine. They've got help for setting up your domain name. They've got help for getting your email working on the same domain that you've chosen. In other words, if you've chosen abcdjservices.com, then getting your name at abcdjservices.com set up as an incoming and outgoing email is going to be necessary. Look, they can help you with all this stuff. You're looking at a weekend at most to get that stuff set up nowadays. You really do not need to pay someone large money to do this stuff for you. And of course, then you're in control of the content. Let's talk about content, because content really is the key here. Just like in DJing, the technical stuff is 20% of the job and getting the music right is 80% of the job. I would argue probably more. In websites for DJs or for any company, the technical stuff is 20% of it. The content is the 80%, and that's what really matters. We teach a framework here at Digital DJ Tips, which is 5 things. And they are who you are, what you do, why you're the best, who else says you're the best, and how to take it further. If you've got those 5 things on your website, which you could think of as 5 pages, then your website does the basics. And so a 5-page website ought to be something, as I say, you can set up over a weekend. Let's talk through those things. So who you are, your name, where you're based, your story. What you do, this is the specific services that you have and the events you cover, potentially with prices and so on. We go into much more detail in our Mobile DJ Blueprint course, where we talk about whether you should be pitching your prices in a sales meeting or on the website or so on. But for now, we'll just say that's where that stuff goes. Why you're the best, this is your angle, your specialisms, the things that you think that you should be known for. Whatever it is about what you do that you think makes you worth booking, this is where you put that stuff. Who else says you're the best? This is testimonials and reviews and photos and videos and client names and so on. Stuff that proves, you could say anything you want about yourself, but other people saying stuff about you, that carries more weight. It's why at Digital DJ Tips, we have a testimonials page right at the top of our website, which is full of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of, people like you, our students, who are telling us how much they value what we do, because that carries more weight. And finally, how to take an inquiry further. This is the classic email address, phone number, all that stuff, so people can get in touch with you, right? Look, this is not hard to do, but you do have to do a reasonable job of it. And this is where I would say nowadays, and you probably don't need me to tell you this, ChatGPT is your friend, because you can tell it all this stuff. You can explain, and quite often I do it with a phone. You can literally just click record and go straight into there and talk about, what you are, what you do, why you think you do something different to other people and all this stuff. And then you can just say, give me a 5-page website with 300 words about all those 5 things. And it will do it. Now, of course, it's not going to be perfect. And your job is to make it sound like you again and not like ChatGPT. Take out all those massive long dashes that no one uses, etc., etc. But in the end, you're going to come up with something quite quickly that sounds like you. And I think that's a perfectly legitimate use of AI. So look, with these amazing website builders that are out there nowadays, with using AI to help you, if you're not very good at writing, but you know what you want to say, you can, as I say, get this whole thing done in a weekend. Keep it really simple, get it live, and then you can go back and change it and improve it over time. Keeping it simple is the most important thing, I think. So look, if you've got loads of money, if you are a high-end international DJ, of course, get a well-known logo designer to get you a great logo that's better than what Nano Banana can do. Get a website design that's got all the flashy stuff on it that you can't really do with these website builders. But unless that's you, honestly, for the amount of money you've probably got available to spend on a website, you won't be able to get anything better than what I just described anyway. So there's no point spending that money. Realistically, that is the way to go. So thank you, Chris, for that. I'd love to see what you come up with, Chris. So do come into the community and share your website, your corporate DJ website. By the way, also just have a look at other websites in your town or in your city or neighborhood. Other DJs who you admire, who you think have done a good job, people who you think you should be up there with, look at what they've done. Get some ideas from them, but don't try and do everything at once. Keep it really nice and simple. There is a service called DJ Intelligence, says Vic, that can do all the back end stuff, event booking, planning, management, and so on, that you can just plug into your website that you've built with a template builder. There's several services like that. You're quite right, Vic. And these can be good. But honestly, to start with, a list of your prices and a contact number is enough. You don't have to subscribe to these services that can handle the whole business back end just yet. Great though they are. I do believe in getting stuff out there. There's a really good parable about this, which is a university once was trying to figure out where to put the pathways on its campus. They were rebuilding the campus and they were laying lawns. They were laying lovely grass all over the place. And they couldn't figure it out. Should they put the paths around the grass so that it was preserved and kept all pristine? Should they put them literally from door to door, wherever that was? Should they make them windy and pretty? And one of the professors said, just lay the lawns and leave it for a year. And then see where the students actually walk. And once you've done that, put the pavements down on the paths that the students have made through our campus. And that's exactly what they did. And I think it's the same when you're building a business, when you're designing a website, when you're deciding where to put your resources and your money. There's no point plugging in features and doing things that no one's ever going to use. And the only time to actually spend money and time doing things like that is when the pain of doing them manually has become too much. And so I think it is just, look, always worth doing stuff very simply. A 5-page website, an email address, maybe a contact form and a phone number, and the very basics. Do it all manually. And when you start to get overwhelmed with updates and with testimonials and with people wanting, to see other stuff and handle their bookings directly, and you can then start to plug in all the extra bits and pieces. So Simon says the absolute most important thing when I'm hiring any local service is the reviews. The website is just a shop window. It just tells me if the service I want is being offered. Yes, thinking as along those lines as the website being a shop window is a very wise thing to do as well. I agree with you there. Ultimately, if there are third-party services that are giving people information about you, your website doesn't have to carry all the weight. So as you say, if there's reviews out there about you, if there is a nice busy social media account where you're posting conversations with your clients and happy people are talking about you and so on, then that is definitely another vote for not going too mad on the website itself. I'm now going to move on to our next question, which is from Tristan. So Tristan was talking about an exciting gig that he's managed to get, which is playing at a couple of sports events in his city. Playing at sports events is great, but of course you are not the star attraction. The sport event is. So they're a different kind of a gig, and Tristan has wisely identified this and has a couple of questions about it. So Tristan says, I'm open format based and I want to know this. What is the best gear to use for this type of gig? Should I use a DJ controller and a laptop, or should I use an all-in-one system? And he quotes a couple of pieces of equipment. He quotes the Flex 10 and the RX3, but ultimately one of them's got a laptop and one of them hasn't. That's the important thing. He says, I'm going to be using samples for moment and play reactions. Of course you are, for goals and so on, but I'm not sure the best way to execute that. Should I be using the sampler on a separate piece of gear like an iPad? Should I be using samples that I can play through the pads of my controller, etc., etc.? So that's his first question. And his second question is it best to then run all of this stuff through an extra mixer? In other words, you've got a more traditional piece of equipment. They're sometimes called live mixers. And a live mixer, if you imagine it a gig, you go and see a gig, you go and see a band, you know, halfway back in the middle of the crowd, they normally have the barriers and they have someone sat there with all the faders. That's the live mixer. And for DJs, they tend to be much, much smaller, but essentially doing the same thing. Everything's plugged into it, and it sends the audio to the main speakers, right? So that was the question. Right, let's answer this question then in those two parts. So Tristan, firstly, the gear you use, I would honestly say whatever you're currently using now. Ultimately, if you know it's reliable and you know it works, there's no need to sweat over it. That said, for me, if I was playing at a sporting event and it's a little bit out of the ordinary, it's a little bit, you know, you've got to go somewhere and set up in a place where there's maybe other stuff going on. I don't know what else is going on in the media room where you might be DJing, but there might be other things. I would be very tempted just to take an all-in-one system, one box that can do the lot. That just keeps it simpler. That said, those all-in-one systems don't tend to have enough flexibility when it comes to playing, you know, your drops and your idents and the extra bits you need to properly do the audio at an event. You need a soundboard to do that. Now, a soundboard is the old-fashioned name for a sampler that can play that cheering and those horns and all the stuff you want to play at goals and at intervals and so on in the game. And the easiest way of doing that nowadays is with an iPad. That's where I've seen the most useful apps. There's loads of them. The one that I've seen DJs using, and it might be different where you are, is an app called OnCue, ONCUE, OnCue. Now, this is an app that you can download for the iPad. You can put all your sounds on it, and it's got a lot of other stuff that's useful for sporting events. It's designed for that kind of thing, although there are others. What you are going to need, though, which is slightly annoying, is that little white adapter that costs about $10 that you plug into your phone or your iPad that gives you the headphones out, because that's what you're then going to plug into the auxiliary input on your DJ gear. You might as well keep it simple. Any standalone piece of equipment will have one auxiliary input. Plug it into there, and there's a volume control on your DJ gear. You can then play the music on that gear, and you can use that volume control to keep the extra stuff you've got to play sounding right. Charge your iPad up before you go. It will have plenty of charge for the match, for the pre-match and for the post-match. And then you've just got a very simple, plug the iPad in, get your DJ gear going, and you've got everything you need. I wouldn't bother with an external mixer. Even if someone else at the game wants to use your microphone, the announcer or whatever, that person might even be you. I've no idea how big this sporting event is. Most DJ equipment that's designed to work standalone nowadays is designed to play in public, and it will have a microphone socket that you can plug your microphone into. So I would just keep it very, very simple if it was me. However, as always, students in the chat have got ideas they want to share as well. So I'll just read out maybe one or two of those. DJ Parallax says, I'd probably go for a 4-channel controller. It depends on whether they advise how you should plug into their sound at the venue. Sporting event coordinators usually provide information like this in a much more straightforward way than club promoters do. Interesting, yeah. And DJ Parallax also says, get measurements. And this comes back to what I'm saying, keep it simple, because you might be squashed into a really small place as well. So I hope that's helpful, and I really, really hope that you have a great event. It's very, very exciting DJing at sporting events, Tristan. Some of my favourite moments have been at sports events, and some of the most shared Instagram clips of DJs doing incredible stuff when a crowd is really hyped up has been the same kind of thing. Tristan, thank you very much for that. And Tyler says, I would look at the Roland DJ707M. I know what you're saying, Tyler. Unfortunately, this is a DJ unit that is not available anymore, but it does have lots of cool stuff in that is very flexible for this kind of gig, including the ability to effectively ape what an external mixer can do inside the unit, because you can take the master output of that unit and you can apply EQ and compression and all that kind of stuff to it before it leaves the unit, which is actually very cool. But they don't make that device anymore, which is really sad. And a question that is definitely related is from Javaman Sanchez, who says, Phil, do DJs need a license to play out in private and public events? So you don't need a license to play in private if people are not paying to get in. In other words, that covers all house parties and that kind of thing. Public venues should have a public performance license, which covers not only DJs, but anyone who plays music in their venue, like singer-songwriters and bands and background music and all that kind of thing. That is there, that's on them, it's not on you. That said, if the sporting event you're playing at is at, I don't know, a local sports field or something that doesn't normally have any music or anything like that, there might be a grey area there where they haven't got a license and you maybe are meant to have one. So that's just something you'll have to check into. I would just check with anyone else who's DJ'd at such events and see whether they've already looked into that. Save yourself having to worry about it, Tristan. So talking of DJ controllers, our next question is from our student Ben, who says, I'm actually looking to get a more portable bit of DJ kit for my gigs, and I can't decide which one to get. I have, and for non-DJs listening curiously to this, I'll explain what the gear he's talking about is here. But he says, I have an XZ at the moment, so I live in Record Box, but I don't mind Serato either. Any advice on something smaller? Legends, he says. Thank you for calling us legends. All right, so an XZ, if you imagine, if you're a non-DJ, close your eyes and imagine, you see a DJ in a big club, imagine what they're playing on, right? Think of the gear, think of what it looks like. What Ben is talking about, the XZ, it's that squashed into one box. It's big jog wheels, you spread out, it's like the size of an ironing board. You spread out and your arms are wide and you're looking all butch as you do it. Well, not necessarily butch, but you know what I mean. That's what Ben has now. And Ben's saying, I want something much, much smaller. That stuff is big, it weighs a lot, it's very hard to move around. So I totally get wanting something smaller. So Ben, I would definitely stick with the ecosystem you're already using, which is Record Box. Record Box is it's the dominant actually platform out there for pro DJing. So no point trying another brand like Serato, as you mentioned. It just complicates your life. So I definitely stick with Record Box. And you've got very, very little choice in the Record Box ecosystem for something small that doesn't need a laptop. Again, if you're using something that doesn't need a laptop already, which you are, no point getting something that does. So the only real choice you've got is a unit called the Omnis Duo, OMNIS, very strangely named unit. It's not really well rated. I think it's underrated by people. I think it's a really nice unit. As long as what you're trying to do is just play music, use a microphone maybe, and do nothing flash, I think it's a really nice little piece of kit. It's not to everyone's taste. It's kind of like finished in this kind of blue plastic, but I like it. And that for me would be the perfect choice. Look, this kind of gear, this kind of shrunken professional gear is very much favoured by event DJs and wedding DJs and corporate DJs who have the big piece of equipment, which they set up. Let's say you've been booked to play a wedding, right? The big gear with the big rig and the big lights is already set up, ready for the evening, for the reception, whatever, in the main indoor part of the venue. But say the couple have got married and they've got drinks on the lawn, right, in a hotel or wherever they got married. Then they quite often want music there as well. And that's where this kind of gear really pays its way, because with some very simple portable battery PA speakers that can just be taken out and taken back in again, and a little unit like this, you can have a very elegant looking portable DJ setup, a second DJ setup. And Denon DJ has one as well called the Prime Go, or the Prime Go Plus is its current version of that. They're very similar. They have a built-in battery, so you don't have to worry about mains, electricity, and if you have battery PA speakers as well, there's no leads going everywhere. And they're just very useful for that specialized use case. And the reason we don't recommend this gear to beginners, by the way, is that in order to squash all that into a small box, you're paying a bit more than you would for more traditional gear, but also the controls are all laid out a bit weird. And it's not really perfect trying to learn to DJ on this kind of gear. That's why I call it specialized gear. So these units are out there. They're for DJs who know what they're doing. They do make compromises. But look, if you don't need the bells and whistles, I would advise you go for the Omnis Duo, the little unit that I was just talking about then. So a couple of you in the comments are kind of agreeing with me. Mixmaster G says the Omnis Duo was underrated at release by a lot of influencers, but they all changed their opinion when they got their hands-on experience. Yeah, we had one here before we reviewed it, and we liked it right from the off as well. And the Ruckus says the price of these units, these little units, turns people off, mostly because they're small. Exactly what I'm saying. These are professional units squashed down into a tiny device, right? It's the same as if you go into the pro photography world. If you're paying 5,000 for a camera, you expect it to be big, right? With massive screw-on lenses and all this stuff. But some of the best expensive cameras are little. But you've got to know what you're buying and why you're buying it. And I wouldn't recommend you go and spend that kind of money on a shrunken camera, because only the pros who know what they're doing see the worth in spending that kind of money on something that appears to be not much better than beginner gear, right? So yeah, you're quite right on that point there. You're so on the money with that, says Michael. Regardless of what DJs think about what they should look like with big, massive gear, as soon as you do this for a living and for a while, the smaller and faster the setup, the better. One piece of advice I always give DJs who just get that little bit of imposter syndrome when they're turning up at gigs with little pieces of gear is, just go and buy one of those big hard cases. You know, the cases that they roll off the back of the trucks to set up gigs in arenas, right? I'm sure you've seen them. Big square boxes with shiny metal corners and big handles or trolleys. Go get yourself one of those that fits your tiny piece of gear and that's got foam around the outside and it's got a locking lid, right? Because when you undo that piece of gear, suddenly it looks like pro gear, even though the actual piece of gear in the case is no different. And then you don't have to take it out the case to DJ with it. You just take the lid off. Sometimes put the lid underneath the bottom half to make it even higher and more substantial looking. There you go. You've just turned your piece of DJ gear that looked like something that was something from your child's bedroom into something that looks pro. I'm getting imposter syndrome just getting gigs, never mind what my gear looks like, says Soph. I love that. Well, I don't love it. I feel you, but I know what you're saying there, Soph. We can talk about imposter syndrome another day for sure. Okay, so our next question, we've got to our gig, we've set our gear up, our website has got us the booking. You see the absolutely accidental, I'm gonna fess up right now, path that we're making through today's questions from you guys and girls. We've done all that. Time to start playing the music, and this is where Andreas comes in with his question. I think it's a he, might be a she. So the question is this: what sound pressure level, or SPL, would you aim at for the middle of the dance floor in a party setting, e.g. a mobile wedding event in a location for 60 to 80 people? The background to this question, says Andreas, is we often get told louder and louder automatically at gigs, and this might not always be beneficial. Wow, might not always be beneficial, might be the understatement of this whole podcast, Andreas. Some venues actually have sound meters in decibels that cut the DJ out if you get too loud. Maybe some of you watching or listening to this have been in that position where you just get a sixth sense on whether it's going to cut the music entirely. And these are normally put there because it's part of the licensing for the residents who live nearby to have a nightclub in their neighbourhood, that the sound is not allowed to go above a certain level. It's certainly very annoying DJing in that kind of venue, but they exist. So I thought the way of tackling this question would be to do this. Firstly, we'll talk through some of the decibel levels so you can get an impression of what different decibel levels mean. And then we'll talk about the practical way of applying this. So 85 decibels, right? This is I don't know what it's like in your country, but in the United Kingdom, this is the upper action level. This is the safe level that they put out there with the health and safety regulations. And the way they figure that out is this is the maximum safe level for 8 hours of exposure. This is not very helpful to us as DJs because you probably play your hi-fi at home louder than this. But there you go. 85 decibels is about 8 hours exposure. Much more useful is 90 to 95 decibels. This is your average nightclub. So shockingly, this has now gone down to about 45 minutes safe exposure. When you get up to 100 decibels, which is a loud nightclub, we're now at 15 minutes of safe exposure. 105, which is a typical live concert venue, we're down to 5 minutes of safe exposure. And when you get up to 115, this is like literally you're stood right in front of the speakers in a club or in the front row at a rock concert. We're down to seconds now. 150 decibels, your ears get blown. The fun fact here is that every 3 decibels that you go up, it doubles the sound engine energy. So 97 is half as loud as 100, and it halves the amount of time that it's safe to be exposed to that. This is quite shocking, isn't it? You can actually get decibel meters for your phone. Now they're not, you wouldn't be able to do licensing applications with a phone decibel meter, but if you go into the middle of your dance floor and download one of those meters, you can actually see what it is. So you could go into the middle of your dance floor, Andreas, and see what SPL you've got there and compare it to what I just said. But here's the truth. Here's the practical truth about this stuff. If you leave the DJ booth regularly and walk around your venue, stand in the middle of the dance floor, stand near the speakers, stand near the bar and hear if people can actually order their drinks or they just can't hear what they're doing, and figure out whether this is a pleasant place to be, that is the best way to adjust the audio accordingly. Except that you're going to be louder than the health and safety inspectors limit, because that's what nightclubs are. They are loud places. Keep the volume quieter earlier on because people soak up volume. You certainly don't want your full volume at the beginning of your event. But also be aware of ear fatigue. Now, ear fatigue is when, as your ears get used to music and as your ears try and protect themselves, they're kind of like everything turns down, but it's an illusion. If someone walks in the middle of the night and you've been turning it up a little bit every half hour because you hear it getting louder and louder, quieter and quieter, and you want to give people a bit more of a thrill, that's going to be painful to people who just arrived. So do be aware of ear fatigue. And the key with pushing the volume in any venue is that it's much better to keep the volume lower and sounding nice than it is to force it and start introducing distortion and harsh artifacts in the sound, pushing the speakers too hard and so on. This is non-scientific, but this is, in my experience, a really great sound system that's being handled well by the sound engineer and the DJ can push the level far higher than a sound system that's quieter that's been pushed very, very hard. The painful audio out of those two, maybe counterintuitively, I'm not saying that it's the one that's going to hurt your ears in the long run less, but the least painful audio is the loud one where it's just handling the sound beautifully and everything is in balance and it sounds good. If you're going to be DJing regularly in venues where the audio is very loud, and often in the DJ booth it's even louder than on the dance floor, it shouldn't be. I always kept my DJ booths nice and quiet. I only turned these speakers up when I was mixing, for instance. But look, if you have no control over this stuff, you can get musicians' earplugs, which are designed to turn down, to attenuate the volume rather than to plug your ears. You know, if you plug your ears, everything just goes really muffled, doesn't it? And you can't hear properly. You don't want that. You want the high frequencies and the mid frequencies and the lows. You just want it all turned down a little bit, right? And that's what musicians' ear plugs do. You can get them extremely expensive, custom made and all that stuff, but you can also just get them off the shelf. Etymotic is one of the brands, Etymotic. Etymotic is one of the brands that we advise day in, day out to our students about this. So in answer to your question, which SPL level, which decibel level would you aim for in the middle of the dance floor at a party? The one that makes sense when you leave your DJ booth and go and stand in the middle of that dance floor and say, is this too loud? Is it too quiet? Is it working? And am I allowing for the fact I've been here for 3 hours and my ears might have toned it down a little bit mentally, and I need to correspond with that, make adjustments for that too. Lots and lots of comments about this. Michael says, I always use in-ear monitors when I'm DJing, which is another good way of keeping control over what your personal ears hear. Of course, then you've got to be doubly sure that what the dance floor is hearing is not too quiet or too loud, because you're effectively turning off the room when you use in-ear monitors. But yeah, lots of DJs do that. Can you teach a lot of my local DJs what you just taught this group, says Michael. Showing up to 50 people gigs with massive 18-inch speaker stacks. Yes, it's very, very loud indeed, sometimes when people don't know any better. I've found that there is a limit to how high in volume you can go without messing up the gain staging, which is a posh word for keeping everything loud but not too loud, as the audio goes from your DJ gear all the way through the mixer and out to the speakers and so on. It says Apostolis, there is only so much you can raise it from the speakers. Yeah, that's true. There really is only so much that any system can handle. And so it's always better to, well, more is not always more, I think is what we're trying to say here. It's a great question. Thank you for that one, Andreas. So our final question today is from a regular student. Hello, the Ruckus. I hope you're well. The Ruckus's question is a purely gear-related question. We answer these day in, day out over in the community in our platforms. So if you're interested in geeking out like we're about to for just the next minute or two about your gear, then do think about coming and signing up for some of our training on digitaldjtips.com. The Ruckus says, I know it's probably several years since you've even heard the name of this piece of gear, but is there a way to save settings on the DJ S1000? I want to set my volumes and leave them at that setting. So for those of you that are listening into this because you love DJing but you've got no idea what we're talking about, the DJ S1000, if you see a DJ in a club with 2 decks and a mixer, sometimes on the end they've got something that looks about the same size as a big CDJ player, but it's got a bank of buttons on it. It's got a 4x4 bank of pads that are all lit up. That is a DJ S1000. It's effectively a sampler, and you can use it to play idents and samples, but also things like drums and hi-hats and little bits of melody, vocals even, and you can sequence them so that they play in a rhythm. So it effectively can be used like a drum machine. It can be used for all sorts of things. James Hype, who's one of our tutors here at the school, has been using one for the last couple of years, and he uses it in his DJ sets to add a bit of extra spice and to, well, basically to push the limits. And so this is still out there, and we have talked about it recently because we've talked about it with James. So no problem, and it's a very easy answer. If you plug a USB stick into the unit itself and then tap, there's a button on the unit with the word project on it, just tap that and then click save. And then next time you want to use the unit, you can plug it in and you can load from there by pressing that same project button. Job done. And I think there's another way of saving out, which means you can use it on any unit that's not just yours. And that's where my personal experience fades out. But I'm sure that once you get to that screen, you can see the options there. Make sure you format that drive in FAT32. This is a general piece of advice to DJs. If you want to make sure, just be really totally sure that when you format a drive and you want to use it in DJ gear, it's going to work. FAT32 is the most universally compatible way of doing it. Now, nowadays there is another format that sometimes works, but if you want to be sure when you're formatting that USB drive in your computer before you get anywhere near any DJ gear, it will give you an option. Just go for FAT32. Paul says it's a really good piece of kit, that DJ S1000. Yeah, it's fun. And back to the volume question, Simon in the live group is saying mobile DJing volume is so subjective. Always walk the floor and always check in with people, especially the person who hired you, and ask them if the volume's okay. And there's a really good point. Ultimately, people need to be looked after if they're paying your salary. So the customer is always right, as they say. And that's where we're going to leave it for this time. Thank you very much again to our students for joining us and making that so much fun. If you'd like to have a question on this, well, you need to be a student of our school. But fear not, there's plenty of ways of joining in. Head to digitaldjtips.com and click on the courses page to learn more about how we can help you become a great DJ and how you could have a question on the next version of this. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please do give us a nice rating or even a written review on your podcast platform. But meanwhile, for me, Phil, here in the Digital DJ Tips studio, get good, get out there, make the moments, and I will see you again very soon. Bye for now.